I was working on a totally different video when all of a sudden every single news feed and their mother started reporting that Tears of the Kingdom is getting no DLC. Is that true? Is that actually true? Well, let's find out for ourselves. Let's go to the root and figure out, is there really going to be no DLC for The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom? So to do this, we're going to be going to the original interview that was posted on Famitsu, which is an online Japanese news website that they basically cover gaming news in Japan. In it, they were interviewing none other than Papa Aonuma and Fu-GEE-Bee-yashi. Aonuma is the current producer for the Legend of Zelda series, and Fu-GEE-Bee-yashi is the current director. So that's your context. If you don't know who they are, now you do. Oh, and I also gotta mention that this interview was originally in Japanese, meaning I can't read it. Most news outlets are translating it using Google Translate. However, I had a recommendation from Laurelian Historian, a fellow Zelda creator, who said that I should instead be using DeepL because it is more accurate. There's also a few words here marked in brackets because I changed them to make it easier to read. If you want to see the original version of this, I will have a link to it in the description below. So, without further ado, let's read the article that's been causing so much commotion. Now then, I'd like to hear about your next production, which I'm anxious to hear about. Is it a new sequel, a new setting, or something else? Fu-GEE-Bee-yashi responded, I don't know if it will be the next production or not, but I am thinking about what the next fun experience will be. What form will that take? I can only say that at this point, we don't know. Psst, in other words, he said nothing. This is just business jargon. To this, Aonuma responded, there are no plans to release additional content this time. But that's because I feel like I've done everything I can to create games in that world. Originally, the reason why we chose to do a sequel to the previous game is because we thought there would be value in experiencing a new kind of play in that place, in Hyrule. So, if such a reason is newly born, we may return to the same world again. Whether it's a sequel or a new work, I think it will be a completely new way to play. So I'd be happy if you could look forward to it. Now, it's very clear that during this interview, they are trying to be careful about what they say. Nintendo is very strict about its NDAs, NDA being non-disclosure agreements. There are just certain things that they can't talk about, and this is one of those hot-button issues which they are never allowed to give a lot of detail on, because you're supposed to save all of that for the trailers and the Nintendo Directs. That's why in the business world, you'll often hear people say very vague things like, we have no plans to release additional content at this time, when in reality they do, but they just can't say it. In fact, this exact same thing happened in 2018 when Aonuma was interviewed about Skyward Sword and people asked him, hey, are you going to be making a remake for it for the Switch? And he said, sorry, at this time we have no plans to release Skyward Sword on the Nintendo Switch. And then of course, less than 3 years later, they did it anyways. Nintendo says this stuff all the time. But what Aonuma said in this interview is actually a little bit different, because not only did he say that they have no plans for it at this time, he also said why he feels that way. It's because, and I quote, I feel like I've done everything I can to create games in that world. Now, I am sure me, along with many other Zelda fans, would disagree with him, because clearly there's a lot more you could add to the world and we would enjoy it. You know, stuff like master modes so that we have more difficulty settings, or a trial of the sword where we go through many different levels in a gauntlet. Or heck, I mean cutscenes. We love seeing cutscenes and lore. We love seeing these characters interact with each other, and many people feel unsatisfied with the way that the characters were dealt with, and we want to see a little bit more detail on them. But I also am not a producer, and if I was a producer, then it's very possible I would be pooped at this point and want to break from it all to move on to the next thing. But regardless of what I think or what Aonuma thinks, one thing is certain. He doesn't think there is a need for DLC for this game, which drastically reduces the chance that we will get any form of additional content. Notice that I am being very careful with my wording here. I am saying that it is drastically unlikely. There have been many times that Nintendo has released content without any intention of giving it more DLC, and then years later they change their mind so that they can sell it on a new console. A great example of this would be Super Mario 3D World, where it originally released in 2013 for the Wii U, and then they re-released it for the Switch and added an expansion to it called Bowser's Fury. It's very possible to imagine a future DLC being added to Tears of the Kingdom so that they can sell it on whatever the next thing is after the Switch. It's also a remote possibility that when he says additional content, he means major content, and that maybe in some random update they will shadow drop a master mode so that if you want more difficulty, you can play with master mode now, but it's just like completely unceremoniously dropped It's not paid DLC, it's just a free update. Because let's be honest, that sounds exactly like something Nintendo would do. Don't get your hopes too high, I'm just saying it is still a very remote possibility. The other thing I gotta mention here, and this is an interesting note, is that originally on the Tears of the Kingdom website, if you scrolled all the way to the bottom, you'd see a little message there that said, full version of game required to use DLC, period, sold separately, period. To many people, this was confirmation that there was going to be DLC. However, if you go to the website now and look at that same spot, you'll notice that doesn't exist anymore. That information is no longer there. Also, and this might just be a funny coincidence, if you go to the Super Mario Bros. Wonder website on Nintendo, you'll see that it also says, full version of game required to use DLC for that game, period, sold separately, period. It appears that every time Nintendo makes a new addition to their website concerning a new video game, they always add that message as a disclaimer just in case they do make DLC for the game. I thought I would make sure to add that because I know that a lot of people were banking on that as confirmation there would be DLC, but clearly we can't rely on that. That was just a random disclaimer they added to the bottom of the website for legal reasons. So where do we go from here? Well, a lot of people have already come to terms with this situation. They say that they're glad that Nintendo released a full game at launch without any need for DLC, and that they're excited for the new game to be already in production. And you know what? That's fair. But other people, like myself, are also fairly disappointed because we were hoping that this experience that we waited for 6 years to come to fruition would last a little bit longer. I'm sure that many of you will recall that during the release of Breath of the Wild, the DLC was one of the exciting parts of the game. We were excited to find out what's gonna happen next. What is this new thing they're adding? What are these cool features? When you're waiting for a good DLC, like one that adds real content, cutscenes, and things to explore, that gets you excited, and that is a good experience. That doesn't mean that we should be entitled and expect a DLC, but it's also fair to be a little bit bummed out when we don't get one. It sounds paradoxical, but if you think about it long enough, it makes sense. So yeah, that was kind of depressing. So what if we end this out by quickly showing off some art that's been submitted to the channel? For instance, here's a great one from rickname_13 of Link making a shish kebab out of Korok, classic. Oh, here's one I'm a big fan of. This is submitted by someone named Air, and it features Link holding a fox, and it has a note with it that says, P.S. Hopefully the exposure therapy to foxes, as shown below, helps you with the trauma. And I will say, yes, it does. I like this fox. This fox gets a pass. Rest of them are evil, but this is a good fox. And let's end it off with this one from Brett Carroll, which actually features the Bread Pirate flags in the background. Good attention to detail. Anyways, I think that's it. So, thank you for watching to the end, and until I see you next time, have fun, storm of the castle.